You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
This is the Daniel Monday Night Community Show on demand through YouTube. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to us through this method. If you'd like to keep up to date with when I add new interviews, then subscribe to this channel. And it's time for our regular book club book review slot with Lauren for you this evening, right here at the Monday Night Community Show. Lauren, as always, it's great to have you along here at BRFM.
Thanks for having me back, Daniel.
So, tell us about this month's book. Give us an introduction.
So this month's book is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. This is a non-fiction book that looks into the nature of shaming, mainly on the internet, but also looking into the act of shaming historically and how it's been used, sort of in particular, how it's used in the courtroom and as a form of punishment. So the case studies in this book were really, really interesting because they were really sort of up to date with things that have been happening recently. And one that's happened in the past sort of 5 or 6 years was that a young girl called Lindsay Stone, you might recognise her name, as a few years ago she put a photo on Facebook of her pretending to shout and put her middle finger up next to a sign at a crematorium which stated silence and respect, and this was at a place where servicemen were buried. So she put this photo on her Facebook as what she considered to be a joke, and apart from a few comments saying you shouldn't really do it, it's a bit disrespectful, to which she replied that she was making fun of the sign and not the setting, this photo went relatively unnoticed. But a few months later someone post the photo onto Twitter, and this results in Lindsay getting death threats and hundreds of thousands of people contacting her to troll her, which then went on to lead on to insomnia and depression, and then she was barely leaving the house. So that's just an example of how some sort of joke that you would find that somebody would put on to Twitter or Facebook in an instant and not realise how much of a bad effect that's going to have. And it was all to do with the shame she felt. And it also looks into another part of the internet whereby a company approaches Lindsay and asks if they can rehaul her social media. So they take all of her social media off of her and redo it, basically. So they give her all these new blog posts. They ask her what things she likes. She says she likes cats. She says she likes pizza. She says she likes ice cream. And they make all these blog posts and change all her Twitter and everything to be that, to reinvent her on the internet. And it worked. She didn't get any bother after that, and it was unbelievable. There's so many examples of different ways that people can be shamed online, and I really found it really interesting. And I'm going to go into more details about what I thought of the book a bit later on.
So what did you think of the book?
So I really enjoyed this book. I found it really easily accessible, and having not read much non-fiction in my life, I found it completely readable. I thought that Ronson made the subject matter very interesting. I mean, it was interesting to me anyway, being a user of social media, but I found myself reading large passages at any one time, and I wanted to see how things were resolved or how people were reacting to various situations. I was hooked from the start, and the book opens with a case study about a chap whose name I'm going to probably murder here, Jonah Lehrer, who wrote a book on creativity called Creativity Inc. I think it's got something to do with Disney, and he quoted Bob Dylan in this book a couple of times, and it came to light that he had invented these quotes and got completely publicly shamed for this. So Bob Dylan fans sort of contacted him and said, oh well, I've never heard him say that, and he made a lie up and said that he'd had this transcription that Bob Dylan's manager had given him, and then it turns out that his manager had never spoken to him, and he was just digging himself this terribly big hole just because of a quote he'd made up and stuck the name Bob Dylan on it. When he made a public apology, he did this at a live talk where there was a massive Twitter feed next to him when he was doing it, and people's tweets were showing up sort of saying, oh, how thick is this guy, like laying it on that he's apologising, and he could have just not made up the quotes in the first time, and it was just so awful. And in the book it's likened to seeing somebody being sort of like beaten in the village square whilst they're being told about their crimes. But I enjoyed this book, and I would definitely be interested in reading some of his other books. I've got the paperback copy. It's out in paperback now with additional chapter, and it's been out in hardback for a long time. But I just think it's so relevant to what we do, like every day. Pretty much everybody I know uses social media in some way, and you just don't realise how much of yourself you're putting out there for people to sort of be able to grab hold of and not always use against you, but perhaps use against you. So yeah, I found this really interesting. I would urge people to read it, especially youngsters, because I've seen the sort of things that people put on Facebook and Twitter, and I just think, keep a bit back for yourself, you know.
And I think we're going to talk about non-fiction in general next.
Yeah, so obviously non-fiction is a humongous genre, and to talk about it in general is a very difficult thing to do. And to say that you like one non-fiction book on, say, hair and beauty and fashion is not to say that you're going to also enjoy a non-fiction book on the life of, say, Winston Churchill or somebody. But what I like so much about this genre is that you can look into things that you have a keen interest in, and you can find so many books on that particular subject. I'm certainly definitely keen to read a bit more non-fiction, and this month, this year, I'm going to try to aim to read a non-fiction book a month, and not always in particular something that I'm interested in. I'm going to hope to garner a bit more knowledge from different non-fiction books, and I'm definitely going to be looking into more of Jon Ronson's books, having found them so enjoyable to read and so accessible, and a sort of it eased me into non-fiction because it was so accessible, and parts of it just felt like I was sort of like listening to somebody have a chat about something. So it was very, very easy to read, and also I know that it's done as an audiobook, which I think would be a great listen as well, because I heard him on Radio 2 speaking to Dermot O'Leary on there about his book, and that was awesome to listen to. So that's definitely something that you should check out, his audiobook as well. And I'm going to go into a bit of further reading a bit later if people want to get into Jon Ronson books or other non-fiction books that I've got lined up.
Our regular book club book review, of course, our book So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and I think you're going to talk about sort of some more books similar, some further reading.
Yeah, so the first thing I would recommend to do if you enjoyed So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson, and this is something that I also need to do, is that he has got a TED Talk on YouTube. So TED Talk is a channel which has lots of different talks from all sort of people from media, like so many educational talks, and I've been told that Jon Ronson has done a very, very good talk on that channel about this book and about the internet use and sort of like your presence online in general, which I've been told is amazing. So that's definitely something to check out. So that's on TED Talks, which I believe is capital TED and then Talks. If you search that on YouTube, you'll be able to find that. But further reading, so further books by Jon Ronson. He's written a novel called The Men Who Stare at Goats, which I believe was made into a film not so long ago. And that's a fiction book. But the other non-fictions he's got are Them, Adventures with Extremists, The Psychopath Test, and Lost at Sea, The Jon Ronson Mysteries. So I'm definitely going to be checking out some of those. I think I'm going to start with The Psychopath Test. That was his first book, so looking forward to getting into that. I also looked up, and I haven't read either of these, but I'm told that these are very, very similar to So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and that's The Glass Cage, How Our Computers Are Changing Us by Nicholas Carr, and When to Rob a Bank by Stephen D. Levitt. As I said earlier, non-fiction is a huge genre, and to sort of like narrow it down to what books you should read in the non-fiction genre, it wouldn't be able to happen. It's different for everybody, but some non-fiction books that I have lined up, I've got 3 lined up for the next sort of months and so. The first one is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, The Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organisation by Marie Kondo. So this is one that's really doing the rounds on BookTube at the moment, and it's about people getting their lives together basically, and having a good old tidy up, and apparently it sort of like tidies up your mind as well as your house and your life, and it's supposed to be really, really good. So I've already bought that, and that's at home, and I'm going to read that at some point. And then 2 other books that I've got lined up for April that I'm going to be read are Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit, which is a feminist collection of essays on things that have primarily been related to men in the past, and When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, which is a autobiographical memoir book by Paul Kalanithi, who is a neurosurgeon and develops a very late stage cancer and has to quickly make the transition from being a consultant to a patient, and it's had such great write-ups, and there's so much advertising about that out at the moment that I'm really, really looking forward to getting around to reading that. So they're just a few of the non-fiction books that I've got planned to read over the next coming months, but I'd love to hear what other non-fiction books people have that they love and books that they could recommend to me. I'd love to hear that, so you can get in touch with me via Twitter and YouTube.
And I think you were going to go over what book we're going to be covering next month, first of all.
Yeah, so next month we're going to be looking at a new genre, which is graphic novels, which is something that I certainly wasn't aware of sort of past last year, and that is the book that we're going to be reading is The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins. So graphic novels are something that have really come into their own this past sort of 2 or 3 years or so. They always were sort of superheroes and Marvel comics and things like that, and now recently they've become a great way to get some reading done for those people who don't have much time to do reading, for those people who don't consider themselves very good at reading. Graphic novels are just a beautiful way of reading, a really, really good reading experience, and have some beautiful artwork in there. So the one we're going to be reading, as I said, is The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil, and I believe this is about a chap who lives in a place where everyone is very conforming to the way they dress, the way they keep their houses, their jobs that they go to, and one day he grows a gigantic beard, and that sort of and we follow that story. So looking forward to reading that. If you'd like to get involved, then you can contact me via Twitter, which is @LaurenTheBooks. I'm also available on the email if you'd like to send me an email, and that is laurenandthebooks@gmail.com. And my YouTube channel, as always, is www.youtube.com/LaurenandTheBooks. And I'm going to be hosting a readathon on YouTube next month, which is so exciting because it's the first thing I've been involved in the BookTube community. And we're going to be hosting a readathon which is the titled of Genreathon. So it means that you can read as many books as you possibly can in 1 week from many different genres. My announcement video is on there, and I will pop it on my Twitter if people want to go and check it out then. And I'm going to be hosting with 3 other booktubers whose channels will also be on my page. They're Brittany from Under the Radar Books, Joss from Scribbles Reads, and Kristin from Vienna Waits Books. And I'm really super excited about the readathon and would love for some of you guys to get involved.
Well, Lauren, as always, thank you very much once again for coming along.